See, this is where you're very wrong. The war did not start over slavery.
Existence in 1854, just 7 years before the Civil War. There are two parties at this point, the Whigs and the Democrats. America is quickly expanding westward, and there's an intense debate over whether or not new states should permit slavery. The Democratic Party, with strong support in the South, has become increasingly pro-slavery. But the Whigs are divided on the issue. Their northern supporters are really afraid that the growing number of slave states would have too much political influence, which they feared could really hurt free white workers economically. So in 1854, the country is debating whether or not the territories of Kansas and Nebraska should allow slavery. The Whigs can't agree, and the party ends up collapsing. The former Whigs in the North form a new party that will fight against letting slavery expand any further. They call it the Republican Party. By 1860, the Republican Party has become increasingly powerful in the North, enough so that a little-known Republican named Abraham Lincoln wins the presidency. Even though Lincoln promises he won't interfere with slavery in states that already have it, he and his party are still too anti-slavery for the South to tolerate. So 11 southern states secede from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. The northern states decide to fight to keep the Union together, and the Civil War ensues. The result is a northern victory and the abolition of slavery nationwide. After the war, Republicans begin fighting to ensure that recently freed slaves in the South have their rights. A year after Lincoln's assassination, the party passes the Civil Rights Act of 1866. They fight to make sure that black men have the same right to vote, with new laws and constitutional amendments. But something had happened during the Civil War that began changing the young Republican Party. These wealthy financiers and industrialists start taking more and more of a leadership role in the Republican Party. They want to hold on to power, and they don't think that fighting for black rights in a mostly white country is the best way to do that. Meanwhile, the South is resisting these new racial reforms, often violently. And most white Republican voters and leaders now feel that they've done enough for black citizens.
Yes, they did.
And it's time to emphasize other issues.
Yep.
So in 1870, the party basically gives up on reforming the South, deciding instead to leave it to its own devices. The region becomes politically dominated by white Democrats, deciding instead to leave it to its own devices. The region becomes politically dominated by white Democrats.
When the South lost the Civil War, somewhere between 10 and 20,000 Confederates emigrated to Brazil. And many of their descendants, known as Confederados, are still there proudly waving the Confederate flag. Now, I totally get the self-exile aspect of this, but why Brazil? Well, it turns out that during the Civil War, the then Emperor of Brazil strongly supported the Confederacy. And once the South lost in 1865, he invited the Confederates to come on down to Brazil, where he gave them cheap land, easy access to citizenship, and even paid for some of their transport. Many ended up in a town now known as Americana in the state of Sao Paulo. Slavery was still legal in Brazil at the time, and the population was largely in favor of it. The self-exiled Confederates were able to purchase human beings at a lower cost than ever before, until Brazil finally made it illegal in 1888. Today, thousands in Brazil still celebrate their Confederate roots, waving the flag and hosting festivals that attract thousands more. But in the past few years, they've attracted some of the same controversy that you'd expect stateside, with groups protesting the use of the flag and debating its true meaning. This really does seem like another US export the world may have been better off without.